we are the guinea pig generation. The reality is, as a medical field, as the best physician in the world, we just don't know. Do you think patients just don't know that we don't know?
Most people understand what that is on the surface, and I honestly just think that as physicians, we probably don't say that enough. It's challenging. The problem is we have all this access to all these different tests, and the imaging is only getting better and better. And so I think we're in this weird kind of bubble right now where we have this amazing kind of technology for testing. We don't have a way to truly interpret it yet because we don't have like the data for it. I just had this itch to go into the startup world myself. Didn't have the courage to do my own startup, but wanted to join one. So I joined the company General Medicine. If I could go back 10 years, I would have probably told that person to.
Hi, Adam. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Happy to be here, Rishad. Looking forward to the convo.
So am I. Let's give our audience a bit of an intro. Could you tell us what do you do in your professional life today and how did you end up here?
Yeah, happy to. I'm a physician, I guess, first and foremost, but didn't kind of land on that path, I'd say the traditional way. I started college thinking I would be a math teacher. We were just briefly chatting about kind of math background and prowess. And I was also just pretty good at math, and it was just kind of natural. And I liked teaching people and helping my classmates. And so I picked that as like my initial major, but I played basketball in college too. So I was really into training and performance and making myself as best as I could be personally as an athlete. And I ended up pivoting to the exercise sciences for my undergrad degree. So, which was, I don't know, it was sort of like a pre-med light type of major. I took an intro class and I realized, man, there's a lot of different aspects you can go into this. And selfishly in college, I was like, man, this is going to be helpful for me, like to know how to exercise and how to train and learn about the body and how it adapts and that sort of thing. And so I got really into that, really into strength and conditioning performance as well. I was always because as an athlete, I was always I was good, obviously good enough to play in college, but I wasn't great, so it was like I had to really work hard to be that kind of differential. And I finished college and thinking I would go into exercise sciences, but I wasn't sure which avenue because you can kind of go consumer or more clinical type of roles. And so I kind of just decided to try both of them. I worked in some gyms. I worked for some companies that had their own kind of fitness kind of program internally, did that out of college. But I decided to go to grad school. And in grad school, I dipped my toe in my first clinical kind of role, which was working in cardiac rehabilitation. And so cardiac rehab, I was like, man, this is fun. I got to do stuff in the hospital and bedside teaching, education, and then got to work with patients, in the outpatient facility, crafting their exercise programs and nutrition and education. So I kind of always followed that like kind of teaching kind of arc. I thought I would be a teacher originally in college, for high school and maybe coach. I had a mentor there and she was one that suggested, have you ever considered medicine? And I was like, no, I haven't. Didn't have any doctors in my family. So it really wasn't ever really on the radar, but I thought it was interesting and a good way to kind of go forward with, the way my life had been. And so that took me to medicine. And I think I was in college in the late 90s. So right when the internet was really blooming, and Napster was around for, free MP3 downloading, obviously highly illegal, but everyone was doing it, and I just got really into the technology stuff that was coming up. So that whole arc was kind of like woven in throughout, and always thought technology and medicine was something that I was super interested in. And so I always gravitated to those types of things. And, I think in residency, that's probably when I first started really getting involved, when our hospital system was transitioning to Epic as a EMR, going from paper to Epic. And so I was one of the resident representatives on that transition. And that just kind of was the catalyst that led me down a path of like really wanting to optimize the systems that physicians and other care teams use. It just made my own life so much easier and better and more efficient. And I loved being able to help others do that. So that is kind of what led down the path of informatics formally. And so, yeah, so I did that internally at Kaiser for many, many years, ultimately becoming the CMIO for the Colorado region of KP and really enjoyed it. But I just had this itch to go into the startup world myself. Didn't have the courage to do my own startup, but wanted to join one. So in August of 2024, I left KP and I joined the company General Medicine, which was really early and incubating at that time, but started with them part time and have continued to work with them through today.
That is an amazing journey, and I have a million questions. Let's maybe go in chronological order. The
Sure.
one thing I really and my math journey stopped after first year of undergrad. The one thing I really enjoy about maths is you can test everything, you can prove everything, and it's part of learning math and doing math. That doesn't exist in the real world. Often, what I found when I was doing my pre med courses, eventually the answer is we don't know. For I found most of the things
Hmm.
come from physiology to biology to chemistry. Like often, it's like we just don't know why this happens. Good example maybe that Lasix has no mortality benefit, but obviously it works. So no one's going to not use it for heart failure.
Yeah.
Is that something you struggle with having the very defined worldview in math, at least at the university first year level? And I'm sure it gets more vague as we go further along. Versus kind of being in the real world and real working scenarios where most things are unknown. There's a lot more probabilities as opposed to determinism happening. And how do you kind of tie that into how we naturally want a deterministic model of the world, but the world exists in a probabilistic model?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't think I ever made the connection between me liking math and like what you just said, but that it actually makes a lot of sense. I've always been someone who, when I'm learning something new, I can typically grasp it pretty quickly. And I think for math, that was particularly evident. And, so like we could learn a new concept in say high school and calculus. And, it's like once it clicked and it clicked pretty quickly, I would be like, okay, I know how to do this. Like I understand the rules, I understand the formula, etc. I think what I quickly learned and what helped me like excel even in math at an early age was I could then like translate that to other people pretty easily. That was, I think, something that was just like a natural kind of gift that I had. I think that piece is probably the piece that I think transferred some like much more to medicine because as you're always like learning stuff, you're taking in kind of like you said, real concrete, possibly even deterministic things. And then there's like that gray area where there's the uncertainty, and so, I mean, I tend to write about this type of topic a bit too, but it's, for me, like in medicine, I think the way I see it is I want to optimize the crap out of the deterministic stuff, like make that like just so foolproof, like super easy for patients, super easy for clinicians, make that part as like automated and amazing as possible because then I think then it leaves like more of that kind of gray area to actually focus on. I don't know. That's the way I would kind of answer, your question. I kind of took it my own way a little bit, but I think that's kind of like been my approach. And that's the part where I see, us being able to actually be able to care for more people with less human resource is to do that. We got to automate the automatic stuff and the easy, I'll call easy in quotes, but the deterministic, the algorithmic, those types of things, we got to make those really simple and easy so we could take care of more people. That'd be my connection, I think, to kind of the math roots to where I am today.
A lot of VCs in particular, but people in general have predicted the AI physician happening in our lifetime and recently within the next 5 years. I think the future is easy to predict. It's very hard to predict when it will happen. We'll have flying cars. I don't know when, but at some point in the future we will. When do you think the AI physician is happening? I know there's a very early bill in the Senate pushing this as well. When do you think that's going to happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think I generally say the similar thing that you just said, that I'm pretty confident it's going to happen. And I think whatever time I'd say somebody with a more conservative estimate says, my general gut is that it'll be quicker than that. But I still do think it's going to take some time. Is that nebulous enough of an answer? I mean, I think it'll honestly be iterative and kind of progressive in a certain way. I mean, I see more of the kind of more innovative startups probably pushing the envelope and kind of pushing what different AI tools can do for care. And it'll be a much longer adoption curve for the traditional kind of legacy health systems, that just have a lot of reasons why they can't change really quickly. But I think like anything, there'll probably be a disruptor or significant disruptors that I think will catalyze this and will kind of force it to spread. And I truly feel it's going to be something that truly patients like gravitate towards and they demand it, right? I mean, I think that's the way it happens in all aspects of our society. Is ultimately it's the customers that really will drive it, and so that's why I try and kind of beat the dead horse of like I really feel strongly that physicians and other clinicians need to really be leading and pushing this forward and really testing and trying things and not being so guarded, because I think if we protect the old ways, I think you're going to get usurped at some point.
It seems like ChatGPT and maybe open evidence are sort of leading the forefront here from a consumer DTC perspective, where there seems to be there will be a solution now where consumers and patients can upload their records into ChatGPT, complete records, and
Yep.
maybe Epic is building this as well with Cosmos and other tools, where you can ask queries from your records. What are your general thoughts on that? There's an obvious fear that everyone will ask, do I have fibromyalgia, ADHD? And not to say that, those conditions are very real. I treat a lot of patients with it, but the social
Yeah.
media push towards if you have these symptoms, you have this. That sentence is can be a very dangerous sentence. That's a little bit of knowledge can be a dangerous thing. No physician diagnoses something from four symptoms, right? I think you just
Yeah.
need more information there, right?
Correct.
Yeah, like, do you think it's this is good or bad? I think if the LLMs are tuned a little bit differently, not just tuned for validation, not just tuned to tell me I'm the smartest human being ever to walk on this planet, which I know I'm not, then I can see this actually being good. But the problem is then people won't use it. So we're kind of in a catch-22 is that this could be really good, but then it won't get usage. And the quote unquote bad versions of this, the validated versions of this will probably get more usage. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're in this weird position right now where the tools, like the consumer grade, I mean, just take ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini. I mean, all of them they're extremely good. And like you said, they're pretty darn good with clinical things. Like, I think the challenge right now, yeah, is like, I think if you just use the generic model and just kind of upload your stuff, present your information, and ask it a simple question, I don't think it's going to generate something that is consistently accurate, because they really are kind of aimed to please, right? That's the way these models like really function. I think OpenAI just recently published a thing where they said that's the reason why these things actually hallucinate, is because it's actually designed to do that. It's designed to kind of give a convincing answer to something that may not actually be true. But I think, there are ways to kind of make guardrails around these things too, even in the open kind of models that are out there for consumers. I think the challenge is like either the consumer has to be savvy enough to put around their own kind of prompting guardrails around these types of things and use it in that way, or they have to like constantly be fact checking, everything with another source, which is obviously you don't know what to fact check when you have all that. I mean, I still think though, from like the standpoint of patients being able to kind of noodle on their kind of concerns, their health information, their data, their different studies and things and labs that have been done, and to potentially like poke and look for other potential explanations, I still think is overly positive. I encourage patients to do that. I think the part where you just have to be careful and stop is if it does say something, you really do need to get that validated by someone who knows, or knows where to look up that information accurately. So I think like where things are right now, where I think these models are extremely good is on the clinical side. So someone who has a clinical mind, or, say like a lawyer, like someone who has law experience and knows how to infer which things are wrong and not. Like if you have that expertise and you have the right guardrails and prompting around these tools, they can be extremely, extremely accurate and powerful for what you're trying to use them with. So it's going to be wild. I think we've hit some crazy leaps and bounds with the LLMs that are out there. And maybe we're hitting a little bit of like, I wouldn't call it a plateau, but it's maybe a little bit of a flattening of the ascent. But I still think there's going to continue to be significant gains over the next few years that, handled in the right way, are going to be really powerful for both clinicians and consumers.
From what little I know about athletic performance and kinesiology, and it is very, very little, it seems like we don't differentiate as much between physical and mental health as we do in medicine. Something I'm thinking about a little bit more recently. We seem to just look at them through completely separate lenses, where it's part of the same human body. I don't know why we have this arbitrary distinction of mental health versus physical health. We're looking for an organic cause of mental health, right? Instead of just saying this is health. And I think we would be much better off as a field and as a society if we just got rid of the label of mental health. Because it's almost as if something is broken with you or in you. Whereas physical health, no one says if you have diabetes, something's broke, you're broken, right? Whereas
Yeah.
if you have depression, like people might say you're broken. Why do you think that is? And I kind of see this in the longevity space as well. It's all about physical health. How do we get rid of this distinction? Can we get rid of the distinction? Why do you think it exists? And I have a follow up question I'll ask after.
Yeah. No, I think humans love to compartmentalize things, and traditionally in medicine, I mean, it's always been very compartmentalized. Over our careers, we've even just seen how much of an overlap there is, across disease states. I think that just comes from a historical context of why it is established that way. But, like you were alluding to and what you were mentioning, physical problems can lead to, quote, mental problems in yourself, and mental problems can obviously lead to physical problems. So they're clearly tied together. I mean, I think what I a lot of times break down with patients, because I think too, patients, if they come in with a symptom, say they come in with like abdominal pain, and everything's been kind of ruled out from a an actual digestive functional or a physical problem, and you ultimately arrive at something, like, IBS or something that's just, this, and you start explaining it to them. And the way I always break it down is that, our brain and our gut are like actually directly connected by the same nervous system. And because if you just jump right to saying, "Hey, I think this is IBS, and we should try X, Y, and Z," and then they go, "Wait a minute, those things you just mentioned, those are medicines that are used to treat depression and anxiety. Like, how is that going to help my gut?" I mean, I think that's just like a perfect example in medicine of where there truly is that connection. But I mean, personal story for me. I mean, when I've had periods in my life where I've had some pretty significant orthopedic injuries, from athletics. Happened first in college. I broke my foot and had to have a screw put in there. That put me out a year. I was definitely depressed during that year. I mean, I clearly had some depression, but it was clearly related to, a physical ailment. It happened to me again, later in my adult year. Probably my 30s. I tore my patellar tendon, and that really put me down, and like even got me to the point where I was like, man, I can't play basketball anymore. And so there's been like these waves of things that have come, and I think those two things really are connected. And I'll flip it a little bit to like, I hate it in healthcare where things are compartmentalized too, right? I mean, we need specialties and specialists for different expertise, but like, I absolutely hate it when a specialist will be like, "Oh no, we can't talk about that because that's not my specialty." I think that's BS. Like, every specialty has an overlap with something else, right? It's the human body. And then the terms we use in healthcare are also compartmentalized. Like, why do we call it telehealth or digital health or in-person health? Like, it's really all the same. I mean, the goal of it all is exactly the same. So I don't know. I think it's just humans. We like to compartmentalize things and put things into a bucket. I think the whole system has been set up that way, from history until now. But I think there's a little bit of a shift. So much of the foundation is still rock solid in that area.
We know what we need for longevity and for athletic performance to an extent. We know we need to sleep 7 to 9 hours. We need to reduce our stress levels. We need to let go of thoughts that are harmful. We need to eat better foods, ideally a more plant-based diet. We need to lift weights. We need to do cardio. None of these things require any technology. Yet it's technology and AI that's unlocking the longevity space. It's tests we don't need. It's more biomarkers we don't need to an extent. there is some role for imaging for early detection of preventive health in general. I'm not saying preventive health
Yeah.
shouldn't exist, but do I really need a biomarker for sleep, or for lifting weights? Right? Do you think we're at a point where we are testing too much and not optimizing for what's needed, or do you think, given the way our human brains are designed for convenience and reward and scarcity and the principles of marketing, we need to do it this way?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's like an either or. It's one of those things that, kind of like you just said, I can be on both sides of the fence, like, I mean, I think and I think there's a tug and a pull between traditional quality-based healthcare and what consumers actually want and need too. So, I think there has to be a balance between these things, and that's, um, so like I've had plenty of conversations with, my neighbors who know I'm a physician, and they'll just be like, "Why when I go into the doctor, like, why won't they just order everything, to make sure everything's not wrong, right?" Or, we have several companies that are doing kind of whole body imaging, to try and look and see if there's potentially anything. And, on one hand, I totally understand that, like, right? I mean, you want to know, like, it's like this element of unknown. But I think, like, if you go into the actual, like, statistical probability of these tests being positive and you get into all the details of that, like, you quickly realize that it's not really good to just blanketly do all of those. I think what we have to do is we have to find a way that these tests can actually be much more sensitive and much more specific, which is obviously the holy grail of any test, right? You have those both at 100%, you're like pretty much money. You can use it as a screening test and confirmatory test. And I think that's like where we just have to really push with these, you know, so-called biomarker tests, which honestly I hate that term because really all it's the same things we always have. They've just
Yeah.
tagged on a catchy name. But and then I think the other thing, obviously everyone wants to live a fruitful life and everyone wants to live a long life, right? I mean, unless something horrible happens to you that you're miserable. I think this whole rush for kind of longevity, I wish it wasn't called longevity because that infers that people just want to live longer. And I really think like what people really want is they want to live the way they are right now as a younger person for a longer time. And there's all sorts of obviously terms and things that are used for that. But I think it's like if all of this is truly just allowing people to live a longer, fruitful life and be able to do the things that they want to do for the longest period of time, then I think that's good. But I think this whole, like, I don't know, the whole industry around hacking different things and trying to find certain things that are going to degrade aging and be able to prolong different cell life. I don't know. I just think we're like splitting hairs at that point because, like, what you led with, all those core tenets are really the things that if you do those, you're pretty much going to live a good, healthy life. And I always tell patients, especially my older patients, or that are patients that are approaching an older age, like, it's even just more important that you do those basics when you get older, right? Like, you got to preserve that strength. I mean, because if you fall down or you slip and you're on the ground and you can't like get yourself up, I mean, that's a problem, right? Like a little kid, I mean, they fall all the time, hit their face, they bounce right back up. But just getting on and off the toilet or slipping in the shower and like not being able to get yourself back up, I mean, those are the things that can really do people in. So I don't know. That was like a serendipitous answer to your original question, but I think all the stuff that's happening right now is very well intended, but I think a lot of people are jumping on the bandwagon of this term longevity to like promote stuff that we've kind of like already known or can already do. I haven't really seen a ton of net new things, but I think some of those are probably on the fringe of really coming together.
Yeah, I think going a little bit deeper, I had a patient who wanted a screening X-ray for no reason and ended up with a lung resection. But these cases are rare. Can almost guarantee if we give you every single test we know, it will result in some invasive treatment for no reason.
Yeah.
And the gap between what we know in medicine and medical knowledge and the appetite for knowing and optimizing our health is very wide.
Yeah.
We know so little about what to do with the tests we order. And even the normal ranges are based on specific populations that maybe don't apply. other populations, and they're based on gender and age and race and medical conditions. So I think there we are the guinea pig generation, and I think collecting more data is good. We don't know what to do with it, and I think patients should know that before signing up for these things. This is an amazing business opportunity. You feed people more uncertainty every time you order more tests because we don't know what to do with them. The reality is, as a medical field, as the best physician in the world, whatever the top doctors from wherever you think are the top doctors from, they don't. We just don't know, right? Like I don't
Yep.
know if your sodium is 134. What does that mean? I know if it's under 130, that maybe we should optimize it a little bit because it lead to bone demineralization. And if you have if your sodium is too high, sure, I should look for maybe something called diabetes insipidus, and like it maybe aren't like this, but we don't
Yeah.
know. There's no optimal sodium, right?
Yeah.
Like a 137 versus 136, there's no difference. And I don't know if that's an answer people just aren't willing to accept. Or is it like, no, you know something, you're not telling me? Whereas I'm like, why would I hide it? Why do you think that? It's like, do you think people just like patients just don't know that we don't know? How do you kind of deal with the question? Why? Well, why wouldn't you order every single test? Like, well, I want to know my complement pathway, right? I want to know everything, right? Like, well, just order and all the genetic tests, and all the tumor markers every single visit. Because if I get cancer now, I want to know now. I want to
Yeah.
follow CA 19-9 hourly. And so the audience is not medical. That's I'm mentioning. CA 19-9 is a tumor marker for pancreatic cancer that we use in ovarian cancer. And we use to monitor cancer, but not to detect it, because that's not what the test is designed for. And we just don't know what to do if it's a little bit high, because a pancreatic biopsy
Yeah.
is not an easy procedure. But anyways, like, what is your kind of answer there?
Yeah. I mean, my approach to it is generally like just this true, like shared decision making approach where I'll try and break it down to the patient of like, this test or these tests are for X, Y, and Z. But I usually will get a pulse of like how much this person wants to dive in. Cause I can go into a whole deep dive of what sensitivity and specificity are. And I think most people understand what that is on the surface, but when you specifically dive into testing, I think that's when people really can kind of realize it. And then I'll flip and I'll start talking about positive predictive value and negative predictive value and like these types of things and that all tests like vary. And some of them, like say like those tumor markers that you're mentioning, I mean, those things can be really kind of horrible at some of those, but then also can be really good for some use cases. And so I think a lot of people think labs are very like black and white. And, I think you asked the question specifically, why do patients have like maybe that skepticism around physicians and kind of the interpretation of these things? When in reality, a lot of these things we don't know what they mean, right? I mean, and I honestly just think that as physicians, we probably don't say that enough. I think patients expect us to just know everything, but like, I think family docs, biasly probably do this a little bit better, but I think we're generally better at like saying, "Hey, I really don't know what's going on with you. I agree, your symptoms, are disturbing, and we've checked X, Y, and Z, and they've all been okay." But I think where this gets into trouble is when there are some practitioners out there that will start to say, "Oh, there's this optimized level of this and that." And I've encountered this as a doctor. Patients will bring me these reports, and it's like a standard Quest lab, but like it has this custom kind of interpretation of it. And patients like, "Oh, they're telling me I'm not optimizing this and that and that." I'm like, "Well, I don't know what to do about that." Like drink more water. Like if your, creatinine isn't dead in the center of, the creatinine range or
That's
less
my
water. I
answer.
don't know. It's like, yeah, it's challenging. The problem is we have all this access to all these different tests and the imaging is only getting better and better. And so I think we're in this weird kind of bubble right now where we have this amazing kind of technology for testing, but like what you kept saying, we don't have a way to truly interpret it yet because we don't have like the data for it. Like I'll take whole body MRI as an example. I'm like pretty bullish that that's going to be something in the future, like that's going to be pretty transforming to healthcare. I think right now, most physicians are super skeptical of it because of the way we were trained and the way things are, right? I mean, because you don't want to just find all these incidental things that you're chasing down and people are having biopsies of and all this follow up, like that's, especially if it turns out to be nothing. Now you just put someone through a bunch of risk. But I think if like the imaging in these tests can continue to get better and better, and the technology that interprets them, including the physicians, gets better and better, we will reach this point where like it's a really, like I said originally, where it's extremely sensitive, but it's also very specific and being able to characterize, specific findings and not just be that kind of typical radiology read that like hedges on something like, it looks sort of concerning, but not, definitive. I think we need to get to a place where we can definitively, characterize things better. Because I think that will ultimately lead to better outcomes, and better prevention.
Pulling on the whole body MRI thread, and I do recommend it to some select patients who I think are a good candidate with family history of cancer or patients I know will be
Yeah.
comfortable handling incidentalomas. From talking to a radiologist and an oncologist friend, what they kind of their frame of reference is a whole body MRI will never diagnose cancer because we cannot see the pathology slides, right? Like we cannot see in it's just it's magnetic waves, right? Like we cannot see inside the detail because the technology is limited. The MRI technology itself, the way it works, is limited. So you cannot see through a wall, no matter what the resolution, no matter how many pictures you take. You're never going to be able to see through a wall because the you're using light, and light does not travel through walls. Right?
Yeah.
That's kind of their analogy. Is MRI will never diagnose cancer. The only way to train a model is to take a biopsy of every single incidentaloma to then train a model to have enough data to say this is cancer, this isn't cancer. What are your thoughts there? Do you think we're doing cancer screening a disservice by leaning so heavily into MRI? And because they have this mythical connotation somehow that's developed that it shows all, but it's still the picture. You don't see the actual tissue or the actual cells. And cancer is, for those listening, cancer is very fast dividing cells. And we see them under a microscope on pathology slides. We can't see cells in an MRI, no matter how much you want to, I don't know, whatever you want to do with the MRI, just like we can't see through the wall, no matter what you want to do with the light, or you can't see inside a ball with light. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So, like, what are your thoughts there? Like, should we be building a technology that allows us to see at a cellular level based on an non-invasive test? I think that's what we should be building, not wasting our time with MRIs. Like they have such a big commercial tailwind that it's easy enough to say, well, the outer whole body MRIs, a lot of people get them, will make a lot of money, kind of thing.
Yeah. No, it's a good question. I think we're gonna have to wait and see how the technology evolves. I mean, I think in the MRI realm, I think just what's improved significantly in the last few years is the obviously the quality of the machines continues to improve. But I think the other piece that's really changed and improved is the quality and the configuration around the protocols of like how the image is rendered, like on the actual screen. And so, I mean, are we going to reach a point where like you can no longer improve what the image looks like and you got to look for some sort of new technology like you just mentioned? Could there be some other sort of thing that could actually get to the level of like a pathology kind of evaluation through some sort of light or image or something, I mean, I think there's definitely a possibility that could come about. Not aware of anything in the R&D area around that now, but I'm sure people are trying to look for those. I just think, with what we have today, I think will be interesting to show over time is if doing any of this stuff actually changes some sort of outcome. I think that's going to be the most telling thing. Will there actually be positive outcome data from these types of things? And I think that's still to be told. And I think, the emerging companies that are doing this, or that at least started doing this, I think that's why they're collecting this data. 'Cause I think they're hoping to be able to show that sort of thing. Because as of right now, none of it's going to be covered by insurance yet until there's some sort of real substantial proof, that it's going to change the outcome. I think we'll probably get there at some point. I just don't know what time frame that's going to be. And so for right now, I think these types of things are going to live in the kind of the cash-based business, or companies will offer it as a perk, as being a part of the company to get these not current evidence-based, testing and exams done. I think time will show. Eventually, it'll show either yes or no, and that could be kind of either the bloom or the doom for these types of things.
I love the framing of focusing on the outcome. It's easy to get lost in the technology and the details, but what matters is outcomes. Yeah, so time will tell. What do you think went wrong or went right with the Brian Johnson experiment, where he kind of launched this, grew it, and then it seems like he said, maybe I've had enough or it's not working? Do you think that's kind of a case study in, just sleep better, exercise more, lift weights? So you're struggling a bit. Doesn't matter how many reps you're doing or how much weight you're lifting, as long as you're pushing yourself, that's what you want. The tracking these things isn't the path to optimization. Pushing yourself, sleeping better, being less, because when you're less stressed. I don't need
Yeah.
anything to tell me if I'm not stressed. What are your thoughts on the Brian Johnson phenomena, and then just the tracking all these things in general? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the tracking piece is like, it's one of those things that I think is helpful for some, and it can be very kind of anxiety provoking to others. And there's like a spectrum in between. I think like so recently, I've probably for the last six or 7 weeks, I've been using one of the Stello CGMs, just to track what my sugar does. I don't have diabetes. I don't have prediabetes, but I think what's been pretty eye-opening to me is just it's all the stuff that you kind of know, right? Like the more sugar you eat, like the higher the steeper your spikes will be. And then on the flip side, that I mean, I guess my background in exercise, I know what happens from a biochemistry perspective for exercise with blood glucose and that sort of thing. But to actually see like what happens, when you do like any sort of exercise, whether it's in the morning, the afternoon, or in the evening, and when it's around food, like you can visually see, the changes that does. So I think like for some people, having that data is really helpful. I've had plenty of people where I think they're just trying to get so much data, and they're like, you become obsessive about it. And so I think if you can use it in the way that it will help you to make behavior changes, I think I'm all for it. But I think that has to be framed up. And I think when patients ask me, oh, hey, should I get this sleep tracker and do this and that? I usually have a conversation with them. Well, like, what are you hoping to get out of it? And how do you plan to use the information to help yourself? And as long as they have like a good kind of thought process around what they're going to do, I'm usually supportive of it. But if I can tell they're like a super anxious type and that this is probably just going to make them super, super nervous all the time, I'll try and steer them away from it if possible. But so, yeah, I think it's like kind of like, I think it has to be adaptable to the type of person that they are, if or when this is going to be helpful or not.
Earlier, you said that you are excited about technology in healthcare and optimizing systems. If you could magically optimize or change one system in healthcare, what would it be?
So, I mean, the thing that's been on my mind for a very long time is, I think when if you ask that question to a lot of people, they'll say like prior auths or the in basket or whatever. I mean, because I think a clinician, that's like what and I agree, technology can fix all of those things pretty well, but I would zoom out even further. And what I really want is like, I want patients to have the ability to really kind of accurately kind of noodle on their concerns and really allow them to like frame it up so the time spent face to face or whatever it is with the actual kind of physician or clinician is like extremely efficient. And so I guess the way I would like break it down is I think we still need better ways, kind of pre-encounter, how for patients to really formulate what's their concern is and what's going on. I think we have pretty good stuff right now to be able to help within the encounter and like synthesizing and capturing. We need even better tools downstream, like the post and across like between visits. I think right now, like patients have real concerns about themselves or their health. And what we've done is we've made it so they only get to spend 10 minutes with the actual like expert for this for this problem. And I just think that is like, it's not right. I mean, it's like they don't remember anything that's said during those 10 minutes. It's like, I don't know, that was a kind of a long-winded way to your question, but I really do think we just need to optimize the whole process of from concern to the patient feeling like they're getting some sort of resolution or next steps. I think that is still fundamentally like the same as it was when I was a child. It hasn't changed. So I want technology to be able to fix that stuff.
Yeah, as
'Cause I
clinicians,
think yeah.
we often kind of forget the patient perspective of things. We're so entangled in our inbox and prior auth, as you said, that it's difficult to kind of see their experience, and we just want to kind of get to the bottom of the medical query and solve it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I can definitely see. I'm not sure the business model or the business case there, but I think there's clearly a need there. Now, last question, Adam. If you could go back 10 years in time and talk to yourself, what would you tell him?
Well, I think like just what I went through last year, where I finally made this kind of proverbial leap to something that I wanted to do for a long time. If I could go back 10 years, I would have probably told that person to follow that, desire and instinct. I had a lot of people telling me over the years, like, you should start working in the startup space, or I can see you doing X, Y, and Z. And I just kept going, yeah, I do too. But I never took the leap. So I would honestly just go back and tell myself to take the leap earlier.
Well, congratulations on taking the leap, and I'm happy to meet a fellow physician entrepreneur and a physician in the startup
Yeah.
ecosystem.
No, you bet. Thank you. I appreciate it, Rashad. Great conversation.